What accommodation was made for those who couldn't keep the Passover at the appointed time? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Numbers on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Numbers chapter 9. We're going to be reading from verses 6 to 14. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Numbers chapter 9, beginning at verse 6. Now there were certain men who were defiled by a human corpse, so that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And then they came before Moses and Aaron that day. And those men said to him, "We became defiled by a human corpse. Why are we kept from presenting the offering of the Lord at its appointed time among the children of Israel?" And Moses said to them, "Stand still, that I may hear what the Lord will command concerning you." Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, if any one of you or your posterity is unclean because of a corpse, or is far away on a journey, he may still keep the Lord's Passover. On the 14th day of the second month at twilight they may keep it. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall leave none of it until morning, nor break one of its bones. According to all the ordinances of the Passover, they shall keep it. But the man who is clean and is not on a journey and ceases to keep the Passover, that same person shall be cut off from among his people, because he did not bring the offering of the Lord at its appointed time. That man shall bear his sin. And if a stranger dwells among you and would keep the Lord's Passover, he must do so according to the rite of the Passover and according to its ceremony. You shall have one ordinance, both for the stranger and the native of the land." In our last lesson, we had God telling Israel that they were to observe the Passover at Mount Sinai at the proper time. That meant that an entire year since the Exodus had now passed. God's instructions for the keeping of the Passover had not changed from the year before, and they were thus to follow them. However, the main difference is that God was not sending a plague that evening. However, the feast commemorated when he did. Now, the children of Israel had been given numerous laws by this point. Laws about what foods to eat, what morality they were to follow, and on various occasions about being clean or unclean under the law. For example, the peace offering was not allowed to be eaten by those who were unclean. Now in Israel, some had become defiled by a human corpse, making them unclean under the law. Their question was, are they being kept from keeping the Passover? The assumption was that they couldn't partake of the Passover. And then a secondary question would obviously be built into this question. Would they be sinning if they didn't observe the Passover? In truth, what they were trying to determine is, would some other accommodations be made where they could observe the Passover? This was a good question being asked by the children of Israel, and it is a good thing that they wanted to know the will of the Lord, for up until that time the Lord had been silent on what was to be done. What would the children of Israel make of God's silence? Did Moses simply make a rule one way or another and say that it was the word of the Lord, as some people do today? No, Moses went and inquired of the Lord. Now, what Moses could do is speak directly to God about the matter, and God would speak directly to Moses. Today, if we have a question about God's silence, God speaks through his Son, according to Hebrews 1 verse 1, who in turn speaks through the writings of the apostles and inspired New Testament writers. That means that we have to turn to scriptures. And if God is truly silent on something, we shouldn't take it upon ourselves to make up law. What should we do? We should respect the Lord's silence and remain still, meaning not do what we can't find authority from God to do. Coming back to Numbers 9, what was the Lord's response to Moses? If anyone is unclean or is on a journey and cannot observe the Passover, they were to observe it on the 14th day of the second month, following the same guidelines of the Passover from a month before. God was gracious here. He knew that these people would have wanted to observe the Passover, but were unable to. So he made an accommodation. He didn't have to, but he did. But lest someone decide to take advantage of God's grace, God warned that anyone who was clean or was not on a journey, who decided not to partake of the Passover at the originally prescribed time, they would be cut off from among the people and bear his sin. That shows us that this was an accommodation. It was not meant to become a rule of convenience. Today, Jesus is our Passover. If we decide not to obey Jesus and take advantage of his sacrifice, we too will be cut off from the salvation God offers and will bear our sins in hell for all of eternity. Let's choose to obey Jesus while we can. In closing, what if a stranger, a foreigner, dwells in the land and wants to observe the Passover? They may do so following the same ordinances. Numbers 9 leaves out another stipulation that is covered in Exodus 12:48, which was that the foreigner must first be circumcised. But since God gave the instruction there, it did not need to be repeated here. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, I hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Numbers chapter 9, verses 15 to 23, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.